Look at this. Former medical examiner arrested. Well, they just, you know what? Did they all meet in jail? Like, what the hell is going on with her defense?
Do you see what he was arrested for?
I didn't even look, to be honest with you. Allegedly
You need to look.
Whew. Boonies, you need to see this. We had previously heard of James Owens wanting to bring in a crime scene reconstructionist. On 9/18, the formal motion was placed on the docket from James Owens. Undersigned counsel has agreed to accept this case pro bono and request the assistance of a crime scene reconstructionist death investigator. Now, this is the request to JAC to pay for the funds for this crime scene investigator. Number 4, the defense requests the court appoint Dr. Michael Birkeland, a crime scene reconstructionist death investigator for the defendant. Dr. Michael Birkeland is requesting and has been paid in other court-appointed cases a rate of $200 per hour to perform his duties. The undersigned requests Dr. Michael Birkeland be appointed at a rate of $200 per hour for 50 hours of work with an initial cap of $10,000, exclusive of necessary costs allowed by statute. In addition, reasonable coverage for travel and travel-related expenses capped at $2,500. In court on September the 3rd, the state indicated that it takes no position regarding the defendant's request. Now, we've kind of touched on this document a little bit already, but what you may not know about this infamous Dr. Michael Birkeland of Pensacola is that he has a very long history. So why am I so fixated on this specific motion? Here's why. We are going to revisit the issues relating around Dr. Michael Birkeland, who Sarah Boone's defense would like to bring in as their crime scene reconstructionist. September 10th of 2012, the following article was published by CBS News. Dr. Michael Birkeland, former medical examiner, arrested for storing human body parts in Florida storage unit. Police arrested former medical examiner Michael Birkeland on Friday for allegedly keeping crudely preserved human remains in a rented storage unit in Florida last month. Birkeland, who is 57 years old, was charged with improper storage of hazardous waste, keeping a public nuisance, and driving with a suspended license. He was released on $10,000 bail. State Attorney Bill Edens said more charges may be filed. Birkeland's attorney, Eric Stevenson, reportedly said that he and Birkeland will start preparing their defense next week. Crudely preserved remains, brains, hearts, lungs, and other organs and specimens were discovered in more than 100 containers last month in a Pensacola storage unit that Birkeland rented for about 3 years. The unit was auctioned off after Birkeland defaulted on his payments, according to an arrest affidavit. 10 cardboard boxes stacked in a corner of the unit contained numerous individual containers with human remains stored in a liquid substance, according to the affidavit. Birkeland declared the contents to be household goods, furniture, boxes, sporting goods, and landscaping equipment. A man who bought the unit's contents discovered the human organs after becoming overwhelmed by a strange smell while sifting through the items. Most of the containers were labeled. About half of the containers were medical grade, and the other half included soda cups and plastic food containers, according to the affidavit. Authorities said the organs were stored in a liquid solution containing formaldehyde and methyl alcohol. The remains included tissue samples and dissected organs. Investigators also advised that there were numerous whole organs, including heart, brains, and liver and lungs. Birkeland worked at the District 1 Medical Examiner's Office in Pensacola, Florida from 1997. He was fired in 2003 for not completing autopsy reports. Birkeland's license to serve as a medical examiner in Florida was also withdrawn. Before arriving in Florida, Birkeland was fired as a contract medical examiner in 1996 in Jackson County, Missouri, in a dispute over his caseload and autopsy reports. His doctor's license was ultimately revoked there in Missouri. Pensacola's medical examiner's office said that the organs found in the storage unit appeared to have come from private autopsies Birkeland performed between 1997 and 2007. A 10-year span. He performed those autopsies at funeral homes in the Florida Panhandle and in Tallahassee. Jeff Martin, who is the director of the medical examiner's office, said about 10 families have been notified of their relatives' remains that were in the unit. Now, this is the original report that came from it. And it gets deeper, guys, because I've actually found one of the cases that occurred in the area where I used to work in Florida. And I'm very familiar with the case. And I about freaked when I found the article that he was connected to this. This article is dated August the 29th of 2012. Now officials are trying to locate the family members of some of the victims. According to the officials at the medical examiner's office in Pensacola, the remains of more than 100 people were found stored in Tupperware containers, garbage bags, and drinking cups. Many of the organs were not labeled, making it difficult for officials to identify them. Formaldehyde, a chemical used to embalm and preserve bodies, was found leaking from a 32-ounce drinking cup that was holding a human heart. How horrible is it for the families of these deceased to think that someone's loved one's organs are basically rotting away in a storage unit somewhere? It's horrible. Meanwhile, no charges have been filed against Birkeland, and his attorney, Eric Stevenson, declined to comment on Tuesday. This is not Birkeland's first incident involving the misplacement of human organs. Before coming to Florida, he was fired as a contract medical examiner in 1996 in Jackson County, Missouri, over a dispute regarding his caseload and autopsy reports. Birkeland had incorrectly stated on reports that he had taken sections of several brains to be preserved as specimens for medical conferences and teaching purposes, and he called them proofreading errors. At the time, Birkeland contended that the actions against him were unfair because he had no evidence to present in his defense. In the meantime, it is not immediately known why the organs were stored in Uncle Bob's self-storage facility. Officials are now trying to determine whether or not Birkeland actually broke any laws in Florida with regards to storing and disposing of human remains. All right, then that takes us over here to this article that was dated November the 15th of 2012. Prosecutors have added 4 misdemeanor theft charges to the Birkeland case, saying he possessed those remains without the permission of the families. We will be arguing that while in some cases Dr. Birkeland may have been authorized to perform autopsies, the body parts or organs he kept without the permission of the family constitutes theft. That was Greg Marcille, Chief Assistant State Attorney. Well, heck yeah. Marcille said because there is no way to put a value on a body part or a human organ, the latest theft charges against Birkeland are second-degree misdemeanor, carrying a maximum sentence of 60 days in jail. Birkeland was already facing a felony charge of improperly storing hazardous waste and a misdemeanor public nuisance charge. He was released from the Escambia County Jail on $10,000 bond and will face his next court hearing on January the 9th. God, Sam, do we want to even go here?
So look at what he was arrested for.
This is beyond just grotesque, and this guy is not. He's a quack. Is that what they call the doctors that aren't any good?
Sure. But just imagine when the state tries to go after his resume, right? They're going to say, and were you not arrested in 2012 for XYZ? Unless the defense files a motion in limine to keep that stuff out because it's not relevant to this case. This is getting more interesting by the minute. As far
that
as
may not be relevant. That piece may not be relevant, but the fact that he's been fired twice for overgiving bad autopsy reports.
But they're not calling him for an autopsy, or are they?
Okay.
Well, the only other thing I can think of is Is he a person that can opine as to whether the suitcase went down the stairs or not with Jordan?
That could be. Reconstructionist. Oh, God. We got to break the news to everybody on this. Reconstructionist. Crime scene reconstructionist. Death investigator. I still think they can bring up the fact that he must not be very good at being whatever he does if he's gotten fired twice.
Possible.
A closer look at a former Florida medical examiner who authorities say had kept body parts hidden in a Pensacola storage unit.
We're, of course, talking about former medical examiner Michael Berkland. As Fox 10 News reporter Jorge Torrez explains, it's not his first time getting into trouble.
That's right, Bob. Letitia, we introduced you to Michael Berkland back in 2007 after medical officials say he failed to complete more than 100 autopsy reports in Northwest Florida. He was fired for it, ultimately had his license pulled. But at what point does a doctor's actions actually become criminal? Authorities say Berkland was walking that fine line. A warning, some of what you are about to see may be disturbing. We trust doctors with our lives, but we also trust them in death. A medical examiner's job is crucial to solving criminal cases or determining death benefits. More importantly, it's closure for families looking to heal.
The family wants answers to why their loved one's deceased.
Director of the District 1 Medical Examiner's Office, Jeff Martin, says it's closure, though, that's been undone for some families across Northwest Florida. Tucked away in a storage unit in Pensacola, authorities found more than 100 human organs and tissue from more than 100 different bodies. The renter of the unit, former medical examiner Michael Berkland.
We found complete human hearts. We found complete human brains still intact. They hadn't been dissected or sectioned, which normally that's the part of the autopsy process is to actually look at the tissues.
Reports show Berkland's unit B12 reached default status for failure to pay on at least 6 different occasions. Each time he settled just before repossession, but in August the unit was officially seized and sold at auction. Martin says the parts found inside were 10 to 15 years old, all retained from private autopsies Berkland had been performing on the side during his career at the medical examiner's office. Now, about half of these parts and tissues, investigators say, were stored in things like styrofoam cups. They were also wrapped in things like sandwich boxes and Ziploc bags. The other half were stored in actual containers. Investigators say it doesn't appear that Berkland actually had a reason to keep all these parts.
Looks like he's kept pretty much everything that he's kept or that he's performed an autopsy on while he's been in the state of Florida. I mean, there's so many. It doesn't look like they were just random selected cases that he kept.
Berkland worked at the District 1 Medical Examiner's Office from 1997 until 2003, when he was fired for not completing autopsy reports. The ME's office says he was given several chances to complete them, but he never did. And complaints from family members, they kept piling up.
It's the worst thing ever. It's a nightmare.
Michelle Helderman says she's been dealing with Berkland for years following the death of her baby back in 1998 in South Carolina.
I was in the hospital for about 6 hours in labor. He had a healthy heartbeat, and I wasn't dilating, so they decided to do a C-section.
Doctors told her the baby was stillborn, but she had her doubts. In a deposition, a midwife testified that she felt the baby's heartbeat. Helderman moved to Pensacola in 2001, and by 2004 had the body exhumed so that Berkland could investigate.
At my house, he looked over all my paperwork and said that, he would help me out with my case, and that he had thought that there was some, something fishy about everything.
She claims she paid him $4,000 for an autopsy and DNA test. She says she was shocked when the results came back from the lab.
No results, no DNA.
Helderman says the body was fully intact and was told by the DNA lab that it may have been tainted. She says Berkland's autopsy came back more than a year later with no new information. At this point, the medical examiner's office says there's really nothing they can do for Helderman. The office, however, says it's gotten numerous complaints from families throughout the area with similar stories about Birkeland.
Our big thing in this that we've heard from a lot of families is that they just never heard back from him. I mean, these are cases where, the families would pay him to perform the service, and then he would never issue autopsy reports in the cases.
We've tried to reach out to Birkeland for his side of the story. Both of his known addresses, though, are vacant. We also paid several visits and put in numerous calls to his attorney, Eric Stevenson. At last word, Stevenson said they are currently working on a defense, looking to explain just why Birkeland kept so many organs and tissue for so long.
His lawyer's quoted as saying he's storing them there just as he would, as a lawyer would legal files.
Florida State Attorney Bill Eddins says Birkeland is facing hazardous storage and public nuisance charges for now. But given the bizarre circumstances, he says he's expecting to add theft charges to that.
We had a conference call with all 20 state attorneys from throughout Florida shortly after this, and I asked if any of them had any experience with anything of this nature, and nobody had.
A lot of these families that we've talked to had no idea, and so making that telephone call to them and trying to explain to them that we actually have the brain or the heart of one of their loved ones, I mean, it's just extremely shocking to them.
Authorities expect to make a formal decision in the coming week. For now, it appears we've not heard the last of Michael Birkeland. Now, records show Birkeland also had his license revoked at his last job in Missouri for not completing autopsy reports. Authorities say he has pleaded not guilty in this current case. Birkeland has a court date on January 9th, then trial set for January 22nd. We'll let you know what happens with any additional charges.
Here's Pensacola. This is where James Owens is. This is where he's out of, this area right here. So this was where Dr. Birkeland, I guess this is where he lives now. But apparently he was doing some work down in Manatee County at one point in time. Now, this article that I'm going to read you guys now comes from The Islander. And it's a very tiny little news magazine that Anna Maria Island puts out, okay? It says, bizarre discovery relates to Morris investigation. Past firings and a gruesome discovery of preserved human organs found in a Pensacola storage unit last week have raised concerns regarding Dr. Michael Birkeland's involvement in the investigation of the 2009 death of 22-year-old Sheena Morris at a Bradenton Beach motel.
The death of Sheena Morris was ruled a suicide more than 10 years ago in Bradenton Beach. But tonight, her family says new evidence proves what they have always believed, that Sheena did not kill herself. ABC 7's Taylor Torregano sat down with Morris's mother about the evidence that she says was always there, but possibly overlooked.
What happened to Sheena Morris? It's a question that's been asked for more than a decade now, and the answer depends on who you ask. The Bradenton Beach Police Department quickly determined she killed herself. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did too. But now, new clues and old evidence have other experts certain Morris was murdered. January 1st, 2009, 2 a.m.
My name is Sheena. He left here probably about half an hour ago. I had deputies come out here because he did physically hurt me.
Sheena Morris tells the dispatcher police had already been called to the Bradenton Beach motel where she and her fiance, Joe Genoese, were staying. Neighbors had heard them fighting and called 911.
I filled out a police report here in Manatee County because he did make me bleed.
She then says she was calling police again to tell them Genoese had taken her entire purse and was now claiming he was on his way to trash her home.
Now he's like, I'm going to go to your house and ruin your house. You ruined my life.
2 p.m. Sheena Morris was found dead, hanging in the motel bathroom. Genoese says he left in the middle of the night to care for his daughter.
No, you left in the middle of the night because you murdered my daughter. Even in the crime scene photos, that purse shows back up in the room.
Sheena's mother, Kelly Osborne, never believed for a second that her daughter committed suicide. She says the police didn't even file the initial domestic abuse report.
that not being handled, I think they had to cover it up and make it a suicide, because that alone, them not handling the domestic dispute, she could still be alive.
Numerous other crime scene investigators and experts have looked at this case, including certified senior crime scene analyst Jan Johnson. She pored over the same photos everyone else did, but this time she noticed something different.
She had to have been in the chair, positioned in the chair for a period of time for that mark to have set in as a lividity pattern.
This lividity pattern that Johnson says can only happen after death.
That means the blood that's settled around, so she has to be in a fixed seated position in the chair for that pattern to have, basically, it's like tattooing.
When Johnson was finally able to measure the same chair that was in the motel room the night Sheena Morris died, she says it matched perfectly with those marks on Sheena's back, but it was nowhere near the bathroom where Sheena was found hanging. Is this a clear indication to you that Sheena did not commit suicide?
Yes, it is. How else would we explain that there's nothing in the shower, there's nothing on her clothing, there's nothing that's consistent with that pattern except for the chair in that condo?
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I just couldn't believe it.
But after all this time and what Osborne calls intentional negligence by Florida law enforcement, she's lost all faith that they're even interested in justice for Sheena.
You know, at first, a lot of people say to you, you know, time will heal. And that is absolutely not true. Time never heals. As a matter of fact, as time goes on, it gets harder and harder and harder because you miss them that much more.
Osborne tells me at this point, she's hoping for somebody else to see this new evidence and open another investigation.
Now let's read this part. Previous to the gruesome discovery, Birkeland played a pivotal role in the decision by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to review Morris's death. Morris was found dead New Year's Day 2009 in her Bridge Walk Resort bathroom, hanging from a dog leash in the shower. The case was initially ruled a suicide after the Bradenton Police Department and Manatee County Sheriff's Office found no evidence of foul play. In 2011, Birkeland was hired by Morris's mother, Kelly Osborne, to further investigate her daughter's cause of death. Birkeland determined from photos of the crime scene that it could have been staged to look as if it was a suicide. It was his opinion that swayed the medical examiner to change the cause of death from suicide to be undetermined. But that opinion is being questioned after last week's discovery and new information that Birkeland has twice been fired from medical examiner jobs, including a 2003 dismissal from the Pensacola District 1 Medical Examiner's Office, which now is involved in investigating the macabre discovery in Birkeland's storage unit. So what did this man do to this mother? Did he give her false hope? For those who first investigated Morris's death, the impact of last week's find and the information regarding Birkeland's employment history is clear. I'm very concerned about this because this is the expert that convinced everybody the crime scene was staged, says Bradenton Police Chief Sam Special. His department had been taking criticism from the mother and her supporters. The police continue to say, they have been telling us for 3 years that he's an expert to base facts on, and here he is falsely documenting. This guy's word is totally discredited. He also said he was stunned at the turn of events, but I'm sure we will find out more in the coming days, and the basis of his opinion is what started this, and he has no credibility. They said the Pensacola investigation won't change FDLE's review process of the Morris case. They sealed the case last month, and they're assembling a team that is expected to begin reviewing the case next month. FDLE is not using his opinion in their review. It was Birkeland's opinion that is the basis of this process, but his opinion has no credibility. Florida Department of Law Enforcement will base their review solely on the facts of this case. Now, the mom says that she previously knew of Birkeland's employment history and now has been made very aware of the discoveries in the storage unit, but neither has caused her confidence in him to waver. She said, we did not know about his background when we checked him out before hiring him. We looked at both sides of the story, and we believe his dismissals were politically motivated as stated in the past. She said that the discovery of the organs in Birkeland's storage unit took a little more time to digest. I had to let the news sink in for a day. After thinking about it, I feel bad for the families whose family members may have organs in that storage unit. But it's no different than my daughter's body parts rotting away in the Bradenton Beach Police Department non-climate controlled evidence room. Morris's fingernails were clipped at the crime scene and retained as part of the case file. Osborne believes her daughter was murdered and has questions why Morris's fingernails have not been tested for DNA. She had a tumultuous relationship with her boyfriend, and the mom she's got that, mamas always know. Something wasn't right. You could also be dealing with family members too that don't want to believe that their person would give up, She further says that my understanding is that Dr. Birkeland used organs in his teaching as well, which is why he had them stored. At this point, I have no reason not to believe he is a professional criminal pathologist, and what has happened hasn't changed my opinion of him and hasn't changed the fact that my daughter was murdered. She said, I'm frustrated with the lack of communication from Florida Department law enforcement and the Bradenton Beach Police Department. There's been no communication at all. They've made a comment. The chief made a comment that he won't talk to me because I berated him. This is absolutely not the case. I am capable of having an adult conversation when it comes to my daughter. Osborne said Bradenton Beach Police Department is incapable of handling a homicide investigation. I will say this. That area, you don't see a lot of stuff like that happen down there. It is kind of a little, this is very much out of the norm. But Dr. Birkeland is a criminal pathologist and is qualified to make this determination. And the fact hasn't changed that 3 other pathologists agreed with Dr. Birkeland's findings. 3 forensic experts were contacted by Birkeland to review the crime scene photos. Birkeland's attorney, Eric Stevenson, told the Sarasota Herald-Tribune that Birkeland's storage of organs is no different than a lawyer storing case files. The only difference, he said, was that the difference in profession and that this incident has no bearing on the Morris investigation. And that is where we are today with Birkeland. I'm going to keep diving because I want to see what this guy has on him. I want to know. Do we need to dive further? Please let me know in the chat. He had told people that his dismissal from both the ME's office was politically motivated, and I'm curious to see if that's what we're going to hear from James Owens. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like and subscribe on your way out, and feel free to leave a comment. Have a blessed day.